marked by Orcus, a ravaged soul. I speak of the Bodak.
All right, friends, it's time to dig into Volo's Guide to Monsters. It's been a minute, so I'm going to talk about the Bodak today. So I think I have an affinity for the undead, probably because I'm a huge zombie fan, zombie movie nerd. And the Bodak is an interesting one because it's tied into the lore of D&D, specifically Orcus. So let's read a little bit more about the Bodak. If you're following along in your Volo's Guide, I am on page 127. A Bodak is the undead remains of someone who revered Orcus. Devoid of life and soul, it exists only to cause death. Think about that for a starter. Devoid of life and soul, it exists only to cause death. Yeah, whew. A worshipper of Orcus can take ritual vows while carving the demon lord's symbol on its chest over the heart. Orcus's power flays body, mind, and soul, leaving behind a sentient husk that sucks in all life energy near it. Most Bodaks come into being in this way, then unleashed to spread death in Orcus's name. Orcus created the first Bodaks in the Abyss from 7 devotees called the Hierophants of Annihilation. First of all, that should be the name of a death metal band, but let's carry on. These figures, as mighty Balors, have free will but serve the Prince of Undeath directly. Any one of these Bodaks can turn a slain mortal into a Bodak with its gaze. Oh, with its gaze. Like each Hierophant of Annihilation, every Bodak bears the mark of Orcus as a chest wound, an opening where a mortal humanoid's heart would be. Orcus can recall anything a Bodak sees or hears. If he so chooses, he can speak through a Bodak to address his enemies and followers directly. Bodaks are extensions of Orcus's will outside the Abyss, serving the Demon Prince's aims and other minions. Unhallowed Fragments. A Bodak retains vague impressions of its past life. It seeks out both its former allies and its former enemies to destroy them, as its warped soul seeks to erase anything connected to its former life. Minions of Orcus are the one exception to this compulsion. A Bodak recognizes them as kindred souls and spares them from its wrath. Anyone who knew the individual before its transformation into a Bodak can recognize mannerisms or other subtle clues to its original identity. Even nature despises Bodaks. The sun burns away a Bodak's tainted flesh. The creature's gaze lays waste to the living. Anyone a Bodak slays with its gaze withers, its face frozen in a mask of terror. The monster's mere presence is so unnatural that it chills the soul. Animals untrained for war instinctively flee just before a Bodak arrives. Ravaged soul. The soul of a creature that becomes a Bodak is so damaged that it is unfit for most forms of magical resurrection. Only a wish spell or similar magic can retain a Bodak to its former life. Undead nature. A Bodak doesn't require air, food, drink, or sleep. Wow! What a creature! What encounters! But what potential story? Before we delve into story and how we can use these creatures, let's take a look at the stat blocks. So they are medium undead with an AC of 15, challenge rating 6. Damage resistance to cold, fire, necrotic, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. Damage immunities to lightning and poison. Condition immunities to being charmed, frightened, or poisoned. Dark vision of 120 feet. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. All right, this is only challenge rating 6, so I rarely say this, but be careful, DMs, with how you use a Bodak. This can wipe out a party, like lickety-split, so let's read on about those special powers and you'll understand why. Aura of Annihilation. The Bodak can activate or deactivate this feature as a bonus action. While active, the aura deals 5 necrotic damage to any creature that ends its turn within 30 feet of the Bodak. Undead and fiends ignore this effect. Huh. That's just a thing. That's just a thing they can do. Just automatic necrotic damage as a bonus action to anybody near them. Wow. Death Gaze, as if the aura of annihilation wasn't enough. Death Gaze. When a creature that can see the Bodak's eyes starts its turn within 30 feet of the Bodak can force it to make a DC 13 con save if the Bodak isn't incapacitated and can see the creature. If the saving throw fails by 5 or more, the creature is reduced to 0 hit points, unless it's immune to the frightened condition. Otherwise, a creature takes 3d10 psychic damage on a failed save. Wow. Unless surprised, a creature can avert its eyes to avoid the saving throw at the start of its turn. If the creature does so, it has disadvantage on attack rolls against the Bodak until the start of its next turn. If the creature looks at the Bodak in the meantime, it must immediately make the saving throw. Wow, wow, wow. And wow. That's not just like a once-a-day power. That's a all-the-time, whenever it wants to power. Think about that. All right, sunlight hypersensitivity. The Bodak takes 5 radiant damage when it starts its turn in sunlight. While in sunlight, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Okay, fair enough. All right, actions. Fist, +5 to hit, 1d4 +2 bludgeoning damage, +2d8 necrotic damage. Withering Gaze. One creature that the Bodak can see within 60 feet of it must make a DC 13 con save, taking 4d10 necrotic damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. Just whenever it wants. So it can do Death Gaze, it can do Withering Gaze, it can do Aura of Annihilation every turn. Sorry. It can do Death Gaze. Yeah, no, Death Gaze is passive. When a creature that can see the Bodak's eyes starts its turn, the Bodak can force it. Okay, so that's an action. The Bodak can force it with a Death Gaze. But Withering Gaze is another option, and that's 60 feet. Wow. Wow, Bodak. That's a nightmarish, scary creature. All right, so obviously at CR6, this is a creature who is fit for that mid-level party. Like one of these can be a real big problem for a mid-level party. How do you scale this to low level? Okay, so I don't know that I would, but let's say that you decided that skeletons and zombies and other simple undead were not enough. You could probably have a lesser Bodak face a party of 2nd and 3rd level people. But you would absolutely have to not use Death Gaze or Withering Gaze. Actually, what party of low-level people would have the means to attack this? It has way too many damage resistances. You'd have to strip the Bodak of like all of its native abilities. So I don't think I've ever said this on Monster Monday, but I'm going to tell you this. I don't recommend using a Bodak on a party that's under level 5. I just don't think it would work. Maybe a really experienced party that were all level 4 and like knew what they were doing. Maybe, but even then you'd have to scale it down. Mid-level, I would say you can absolutely use this for levels 5 through 10 without making any adjustments. This is a deadly encounter. High level, I would say that you could absolutely use this as is with a high level party, but you just add a bunch of them. So maybe you have a coven of Bodaks that serve Orcus. Okay, so those are all easy scalable things, right? My usual spiel about either taking away some of their abilities or some of their defenses, or boosting some of their abilities or defenses, or giving them a higher armor class, or giving them more hit points, or making the DCs of their powers higher for high level. How do you use the Bodak in your game? Okay, I don't think the Bodak is great for a random encounter. I would not use the Bodak for a random encounter. This is a perfect example of a monster that is geared towards a long-term story. Why? Orcus. It says right there, they serve Orcus. I see the Bodak as like an information intelligence network for Orcus. Mindless, evil creatures that serve Orcus's will. A plague upon the mortal realm, but also people who are or creatures that are capable of spying on behalf of Orcus, spying on the party of adventurers. So let's give an example. You're running a D&D campaign and your party is heroic. They're good people, right? They've attained mid-level. And now they're kind of on the radar of evil, maybe without even knowing it. Maybe they foiled some minor cult dedicated to Orcus, right? And they took some, they destroyed some small shrine or temple that this cult was building to Orcus, or they interrupted a ritual, whatever it is, right? They did their good guy jobs. And now they've gotten on Orcus's radar. Orcus is not going to come out to wail on them, but Orcus might send a Bodak to spy on them. And maybe that's the first time the party encounters a Bodak, is, they're mid-level, they've done some good deeds, and at nighttime in a camp, they're being spied on. And maybe the Bodak doesn't outright attack them, but you make this mysterious. Maybe the horses lose their shit, right? And they scramble away, and the party's like, what's scaring the horses? And the Bodak doesn't reveal itself. And then maybe later on, the Bodak's still following them, and they're in an inn in a city or something, or they're exploring the ruins of a place, and the Bodak has followed them. And now they actually have an encounter with the Bodak. It goes as expected. They defend themselves, and the Bodak ends up being killed. They notice this, you describe vividly this mark on the Bodak's chest, and somebody, within the party makes the Arcana check, and they determine this is the mark of Orcus. And then they're interested, and they want to know more. Now, I wouldn't let them just make another Arcana roll to see if they know what this creature is. I would have them actually have to research it. So they get to a city and they go to a temple, or they go to a bard college or a wizard library, a university, and they do some research and investigation, and they find out about this ritual that turns mortals into these husks of a shell that are known as Bodaks, right? So now you've had multiple kind of follow-up situations that build this story. Now they're asking themselves, well, why? Why is this Bodak after us? And maybe you tie that back in your storyline to some clues about that cult that they foiled, 2 or 3 adventures ago. They didn't even know that was a cult to Orcus. Maybe that's it. Maybe you don't even reveal that it was a cult to Orcus, and they make that connection later with the Bodak. So you start tying this Bodak into this bigger thing, right? And maybe you're one of those people who's like, I really love, the D&D published stuff, and we're going to be doing Descent into Avernus. Maybe you tie this in somehow to the wars between the demons and the devils. I don't know. But that's another way to tie it in. Or you keep it on the mortal realm, and more Bodaks kind of come along and spy. And eventually maybe they confront one of the Bodaks, and Orcus speaks through the Bodak and is like, I want what is mine. And they're like, what is it? We didn't take any of your foul, evil relics. And maybe Orcus is like, I want their soul. Maybe you have a warlock in the party who's got a pact with a fiend and didn't know that pact was with Orcus. I don't know, I'm just making things up now. But do you see how I think that the Bodaks could be very long-term as agents or spies of Orcus, and eventually, leading to higher level encounters. But that first kind of intermediary encounter could be multiple things. And then maybe it reveals other things to your heroic party of good folks, and they find out that there's this network of cults to Orcus where they're going to be doing some more ceremonies that are going to create more Bodaks. And now the party knows this, and maybe they have a moral obligation to stop it and stand up to it. So a lot of opportunities there to intertwine other encounters and adventures into an overall longer running campaign setting where the Bodak is kind of this recurring bad guy who's not the big bad end guy. That's Orcus. And maybe Orcus isn't even the big bad end guy. You know, maybe the Hierophants of Annihilation are the big bad end guys. So, but I think the Bodak is a really cool thing to check out, and it's very deadly. And I think this might be one of the very first times where I strongly suggest that you don't scale this down to use it against lower level creatures, because I think that could be deadly. If you want to introduce the Bodak to a low level party, have it be with like a human cult of Orcus worshippers who are just humans and not Bodaks. And that could lead to, you know, other encounters that then allow you to use the Bodak. So if you have used this as a DM, please share your story of how you've used it. As a player, if you've encountered Bodaks, share how that was handled. And if you liked it, if you didn't like it, share those in the comments below, because we always enjoy reading those things. Until next time, thank you guys, as always, for your support. Please consider subscribing, liking, clicking that thumbs up, and sharing Monster Monday with whatever community you jam with. Take care. Enjoy your adventures.